I'm
dressed.
cold, but I'm just,
Oh,
I lost some weight, so I'm cold all the time now.
yes. That's another discussion.
Another conversation.
Yes. So the first question is, in the last Q&A, you mentioned being able to trust yourself before you can trust others. What does it mean to trust yourself, and how does one do that? My trauma has been having what I feel a transactional relationship with my mom growing up. I am not sure if this is the addict or the partner. So go ahead.
I want to grab my earbuds. You want to start this one? I'll be right back.
Yeah. Yeah, if the person who asked this question could throw in the chat if you are an addict or the partner, that would be really whoa, oh, this is from the addict. Thank you. So thank you. That helps. So be able to trust yourself before you can trust others. Oh my gosh. I'm going to have to mute because my phone is ringing nonstop. It's been a crazy day.
Yes,
so, anyway,
it's been that way.
So this question, can you see it, or should I put it in?
I can't.
I'm going to hit answer live and then done, and I'm putting it in answered.
There we go.
Now
Thank you.
you can
now
see
I
it.
can see
Okay.
them.
All right.
And I don't want to miss anything in there.
I know.
That's why
we have a system.
Thank you.
So we're gonna make it work. So
okay.
So yeah. So this is the addict saying, how do I learn to trust myself first? So.
Well, I guess the answer is I don't trust myself in this particular area. I may trust myself. I'll tell you where I trust myself. I trust myself to be honest to Tammy. We have a good working relationship. I have no reason not to be. I have trust myself to not steal anything from the store. Maybe when I was 14, I might have taken a little something, but now, I trust myself to not have sex with strangers because we're working on this for many years and have a lot of sobriety. But if I were in early recovery, I wouldn't trust a lot of my decisions. And this is why we have people to turn to. I don't think anyone recovers alone. I think Tammy would agree with that. And therapists aren't enough. Maybe a therapy group if you can find the right one. But the idea that you can find people in recovery who for nothing will follow you, answer your questions, support you, sponsor you, those are the people I would turn to and say, do you think this is a good idea? Or do you think it isn't a good idea? In other words, I don't necessarily trust any potentially addict decisions to myself. I always reach out and ask others. I will, however, give you a really good clue, which I know Tammy loves this when I say this. There was a woman I worked with in treatment many years ago, and I really respected her recovery. She did a good job. And one of the things she said to me, I will never forget. She said, when I decide to do something, go shopping, go to the store, put on a mask, whatever the heck it is, I don't question it. I just do what I want to do. Maybe I think about when or where. But when I say to myself, I wonder if that's a good idea, it should be a warning sign for me to not make any decisions without checking out from someone else. So if you were coming here asking a specific question, saying, is this a good idea or isn't it? I would think it's already something to be questioned. So that's the best I could do.
Well, and I want to key on two things. I always thought, in early recovery, I did not trust myself, and I did trust others because others had proven that they actually had a plan, that they'd been successful in staying in recovery for any kind of period of time. So I really had to learn to trust others before I could learn to trust myself. And I do, on a day-to-day basis, do I think I'm going to, act out today? I don't, because I've done what I need to do. So I have learned, and, I trust Dr. I have relationships that have developed trust over time. But the other thing I was thinking about when you said a transactional relationship with my mom growing up, I would invite you to look into that. What does that mean? There's a lot of trauma, but there's a lot to unpack in that one little statement, a transactional relationship with my mom growing up. Two things. Enid Gray will be doing Super Saturday Recovery Summit on March 20th, and she wrote "Neglect the Silent Abuser," and a parent not having the bandwidth for their children is a form of neglect, even if it wasn't overt. That still is problematic. And then the other thing, and I don't know if this is as much of a fit, but well, actually, here's another one. Troy Love does a whole bunch of stuff, finding peace with attachment wounds. The abandonment or neglect or whatever could be part of that. But then I was also thinking, Dr. Ken Adams did a podcast with Dr. Rob on sex, love, and addiction. I know we've got so many things. Sex, love, and addiction podcast, and there was a string of enmeshment, like where there's a demand, from mom on that. So consider that as well as, to be a possible place to explore. So.
And I would add to that just, the idea of a transactional relationship. That's what a lot of addicts struggle with. The challenges are intimate relationships are the ones that, where there isn't anything necessarily except caring and trust and kindness and, or even frustration. That's not necessarily a transactional relationship. That's a sharing, giving relationship. But if we are stuck in our addiction on transactional relationships, getting for extra money or getting love for the intensity of the affair, that's what we grew up with. We learned how to have transactional relationships where we use other people and they use us, because that is what often happened to us in youth, and that's what we learned. Learning to have a non-transactional relationship was where you're giving and you might not get back for a while, or you get back in other ways, or, by the way, I want to go back to 12-step program. There's this idea of service, which I think is really important. I know I won't say what I do, but I do services every week and I do it for lots of people. And, I'm not getting anything back from that. And I think, when you're in these support groups or 12-step programs and you say, oh, I've gotten something, I figured something out, someone behind you is going to say, oh, I want to learn that. And it's not transactional to share what you've gotten. So anyway, I think you're absolutely the right question. And I would move away from transactional relationships in my personal life. It's okay if you're buying a car, getting some gas, but not so much in relationships.
So the next question, I put it in the answer. Do you know any resources regarding trauma bonds and how to break them?
Well, I'm not sure what a trauma bond is. So I know that people have written books about it. I think we all have opinions. I'll give you the same answer. Well, if you're a single person, I'll give you the same answer as the one I just gave, which is if you tend toward choosing the wrong people, maybe you're not the best person to choose those people. And you may always end up bonding to the wrong people. But if there are other people in your life, like sponsors, like friends, like a therapist who know your stuff, know who you've dated, know how you can move into fantasy when you really should be looking at reality, then those are the people who can be your guides. Again, I don't ever try to make decisions around sex and love unless I have somebody else involved, not someone I meet on the street, but a very good close friend, because I don't trust myself in those areas. I wanted to say something else about that question.
Trauma bonds and how to break them.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at it. I guess I don't even believe in the concept of trauma bonds, because to me it kind of feeds into codependency, which is what I'm not a fan of. I think that I wrote a book called Prodependence. Tammy, I had a whole discussion about this the other day. I wrote a book called Prodependence, and it is a counter to codependency. And the last chapter is about how and why people with issues find people who have issues. The bottom line is and I know you ladies, especially your partners, don't like this, but let me explain. I am not saying that you in any way chose to pick an addict. I'm not saying in any way you chose to pick an active addict. I'm not saying that in any way you chose to, or anything that you did or your past has to do with them being an addict. None of that. I'm just saying on a level of our emotional functioning, our ability to connect and feel comfortable and be empathic, our exchanges, that really depends on where you're at. So if you're a 2, you're someone who has a lot of drama, a lot of issues, lots of stuff going on, you're single, you look over at that and you say, I want an 8, I want an 8, I want someone who's together. And you look down at that 8, and I know so many of you ladies will relate to this, and that 8 is boring. Like, who would want to date that person? And the 8 looks at us, we're a 2 or a 3 emotionally, whatever our issues are, and they say, oh my God, too much drama. Yeah. So we're never going to marry an 8, or likewise. But I do believe that when we are with someone who has challenges like our own, who's working on them, not actively acting them out, that we as a couple have a better chance together to grow from 2 to 4, from 4 to 6, or whatever our emotional ability is. I can grow with lots of people around me, and I do, but with that one person who forms a foundation of life with me, if we're both committed to integrity, we're going to grow faster. And so what I say to you who are bad daters is, listen, you're going to pick someone who's a little screwed up. Probably, if you're a little screwed up, and we're all a little screwed up, but try to pick the person who's already sober. Try to pick the person who's already in therapy. And I'll give you Rob's rule for relationships. Tammy, you know my rule for relationships. It's very simple. You can hurt me, you can let me down, you can disappoint me. That happens in relationships. And I'm glad, if you can come back and we can talk about it. But if you can't own your part, if you can't come back and say, I know you did this, but I did that. And if we can't come to some kind of agreement that whatever happens, we're each a part of it in the relationship, I can't be in that relationship. Because I grew up in a place where people would say, why are you bringing that up? And why are you talking about that? And why are you always making trouble? And so I was always the person who was wrong for talking about the things I saw around me, because nobody else wanted to talk about them. So I cannot be in a relationship now where I'm always at the end of, why did you bring that up? Why are you talking about problems? Why don't you just be nice? I can't do that. We each have to be able to own our stuff. And that means that's why I only date people who are in therapy, who have gone to treatment, whatever, or program, because they have the ability to self-express and self-reflect. You may do it in a screwed up way, but at least you can do it. So I don't know, Tammy, do you like that rule? Does that rule work for you?
And it does. I would not be able to be in a relationship either, and don't really gain close friendships with people who are unable to step into that space. So, I would rather know that our bond is strong enough to be able to work through things. So we just own our stuff and we talk through it, and we get there. I'm not good at hiding behind things. So.
And by the way, many a morning, especially during COVID, over the last so many a year, of facing only one person in my house all the time. And by the way, we're not fighting now about things out there like the car, the vacation. We're fighting about, are the cabinet doors completely open or are they not? Because our world has gotten so small. But I absolutely know that in the morning, once in a while, we're going to say, screw you, well, screw you too. And if you think a good marriage doesn't do that, you're not at least my kind of good marriage. So we'll be yelling and screaming at each other. At a certain point, we'll come back and say, I'm really sorry I spoke to you that way. What I meant was this. I felt like, we don't do it perfectly, but we own it. And that really is the key to a good relationship.
And I don't have to get to the yelling and screaming. I can just go, we've navigated it. So we got lots of questions. So I put the next one in the answered. I've been seeing sex workers twice a week for the past couple of months. My CSAT advised that I do this with awareness and learn that my core beliefs with them. It's gotten to the point where every experience I've had in the past month with a sex worker has been awful. I'm getting ripped off or some type of drama happens. Was this good advice from my CSAT? I'm single and a level 1 SA. I'm always fascinated by level 1 SA and all of that. So I guess I don't know.
I think that's Pat Carnes' book, looking at the different levels of addiction.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what that means. So there's level 1 and then there's level 2, and they're arbitrary, Pat. Dr. Carnes made those up.
I'm an addict.
He made those up.
Okay.
Like the idea of trauma bonds he made up, like the idea of sexual anorexia. These are all concepts he made up. They're not really proven. But in any case, I wanted to answer this question.
Yes, please.
And so I'm just going to be really, really honest, because one of the things that people value in me, I think, like me or not, is my honesty. I think you have the wrong therapist. I don't care whether they're a CSAT or an ABCD MOUSE. Now, granted, you may be lying to us, and they may not have said that in exactly that way. You may have gone out and justified something that may have said A, and you went out and did B, C, D, E, and F. Well, addicts tend to do that. But I would never tell someone with a sexual problem to solve it with sexual behavior. My having an affair is not going to be solved by my masturbating to porn. My masturbating to porn is not going to be solved by my seeing sex workers. It's like what your CSAT or whoever the F they are is telling you is, well, you don't have to worry about going to those bars and drinking whiskey. You can just have a little bit of red wine at home whenever you want it, and then you won't drink and drive. Well, great, that might solve that problem, but you're still alone home drinking and ruining your life. So I absolutely disagree. I think two things. Number one, a lot of us come into treatment saying, I have the porn problem, that's the issue, or I see sex workers, that's the issue. And I can still look at porn because it's the sex workers that's the issue, or I can still have the affair because the porn isn't a problem. And the reality is, if you're going to look at this, you have to look at all of your sexual behavior and your entire sexual life and your relationship with gender, all of it. And I have never seen a sex addict be successful by picking in pieces. Well, I like this part, maybe I can do more. By the way, if you're single, there's this thing, excuse my snarkiness, there's this thing called dating. And dating is getting to know someone without having sex. And especially for us, where we tend to misjudge and move into sex right away, we really need a lot of boundaries around getting to know people. The last thing I need to be doing as a sex addict is objectifying people, using them for sex, disappearing. So I think that's some of the worst therapeutic advice I have ever heard. And if I won't say who it is, I don't know who it is. Tammy and I would never refer to that person, that's for sure. Look, they're either, one of the things that I had to do in my early recovery is I had to stop having sex altogether for a while, like 90 days or 6 months. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that. And I'm not saying you necessarily learn healthy intimacy from that, because you're shutting down that part of you. But boy, do you learn what it's like, what you were like when you're not running to escape. I'll say one more thing about what you're doing. All sex addicts want something that is not possible to get. It is an oxymoron. Oxymorons are two things that don't go together, like jumbo shrimp or military intelligence or things like that. And my favorite oxymoron is controllable intimacy, because that's what we want. We don't ever want to be abandoned. We don't want to ever be left. We don't want to ever be disappointed by our partners. We don't ever. So we get into, what's the word for it? Limited relationships with our spouses so that we don't let them too far in. In fact, you spouses will always say, I feel like he or she's keeping me at a distance. And then we run over here for the other part, but we really don't on any full level pull our lives together. The reason we named our treatment program is Seeking Integrity. There was a reason. I used to have a program called Sexual Integrity. Seeking Integrity here in California is dedicated to one thing, and it's not just about sex. It's about, can that man be completely and utterly, can he completely and utterly live his life with integrity? And what I mean by integrity is very clear. Integrity comes from the word integration. The word integration comes from pulling separate parts together. That is who we have to be in recovery. I can't go to work and say to you, oh, I'm sorry I was late, I was seeing a sex worker. That is incongruent. I wouldn't say to Tammy, hey, Tammy, sorry, we didn't make that meeting, but I was looking at porn all afternoon. You would look at me like, how could you possibly be an expert in this if you're splitting your life in that way? And I say the same thing to you. No one around you you don't want your grocery store person to know about your sex life. But, if anyone in the world knew I took a shower this morning, they wouldn't be surprised. If anyone in the world knew I got a vaccine last week, they wouldn't be. So anything in my life that I would not want others to know, maybe, and it's certainly that there aren't a few people who know all of it, I'm in trouble. So I said a lot about that, but I had a lot of feelings about that's so not okay, Tammy. Oh, I can't hear you now. Tammy, you muted yourself because I talked so long, probably.
No, I did, because I have a tickle, and so I've got another lozenge so that I don't have the cough fit. So the next question is, I put it in the answer too. Active sex addicts usually objectify when acting out. I don't know if it's usually or always. That would be an interesting question. Do they all also objectify their wives, or is it possible that it's real intimacy?
Well, in part, I think this is a time issue. If someone is in early recovery, like the first year, it doesn't mean that you might not have sex with them as a partner, but can you look them in the eye? Are they looking in the eye is a really big one. Can we look it in the eyes and continue to be sexual? If you turn away or feel distant, can I say to you, which is actually more important, by the way, than whether they objectify me or not, is can I stop the process and say, I don't feel really comfortable. I'm not sure you're really present. This is where trust your gut really comes in. Or maybe, by the way, we need to evolve our sexuality more slowly. Maybe for a couple of months, you want to not objectify your partner. Spend a couple of months holding hands, massaging back, combing someone's hair, doing very intimate things that are not sexual. It's less likely that they're just going to get into objectification. Here's the last thing. If I am really with you as a partner and I'm committed and connected and have no lies and secrets and I'm working really hard and I'm sexual with you as a partner, as a newcomer to addiction recovery, it's very difficult for me to get aroused by being with a spouse. And it's even more difficult for me to want to be sexual with my spouse. Now, you spouses may be saying, well, what's wrong with me? And I'm going to say there's nothing wrong with you, except those of us who have sex addiction, porn addiction issues, we were actually very afraid of intimacy. Someone was talking about maternal being used by a mother. A lot of us, when we get close to a loved one, very close and dependent, a part of us goes, oh my God, that person's going to hurt us or let me down, and I need to stay a little bit distant or a lot distant. And what is the most intimately emotional, physical connection you can be in, and the most vulnerable? Having sex. So for us sex addicts to learn to turn to our partners and be willing to be sexual. I'm not for sure I'm aroused, but I'd like to hold you. I'd like to rest you. I'd like to kiss you. I'd like to, and let's see what happens. In other words, if arousal comes through connection, we've known each other, we're looking at each other in the eyes. Many sex addicts will say, oh, I'm not interested in sex. That's because you're not the hot porn image with the next porn image and you're not the affair partner. No, we're always looking to intensity for our arousal. What we have no idea how to do is find sexual arousal through the connection and through intimacy. And to be quite honest, I can try to objectify you all you want, but if we've been married 20 years, I'm looking at that thinking I've seen that thing before. So I'm not going to be able to approach you through intensity into sex. I have to approach you through intimacy. Now, I'll be really honest about this personally. I would rather read a book than have sex with my spouse. I'd rather watch TV than have sex with my spouse. I'd rather do anything because it's on some level, it's uncomfortable. And when I'm willing to massage and look into each other's eyes and light candles, when we get in that place, I'm always, oh my goodness, I'm aroused. Oh my goodness, we had sex. I never expected that. Because for us recovering people, sex comes from willingness, not from intensity and horniness. And that's a learned experience.
So the next question is, I'm a partner in early stages of porn use being discovered 4 months. Is there a different approach for partners to take before it is sorted out if this is an addiction or a habit? He is in counseling, as am I, and soon will be in couples counseling. Thank you.
Well, there are a lot of things here. Like, did you know that, I'm going to say husband or partners, in other words, did you know that your partner was using porn? Because I think that's something that couples need to talk about. I might do this once in a while. This is certainly, it's like anything. I might do this once in a while. I don't want you coming home and discovering it and being upset. So let's discuss it before. Is it okay for me to look at porn or not? And under what circumstances? Maybe when you're only out of town or whatever that is. So first of all, is it a problem in the coupleship because it's never been talked about and then was discovered? That's a problem in and of itself, because why didn't you just say, hey, this or that as you were growing the relationship, or at least when you moved in together? The second thing, between an addiction and a habit, I think this is pretty well answered in a lot of recovery addiction literature in a kind of simple way, not a fact, but a good way to think about it. If you think you might have a problem with something, just cut it out for 30 days. Simply do not do it. Don't go near it. Don't have anything to do with it. Most addicts are unable for that period of time to not maybe take a peek, or maybe just, go through and talk to someone. It's very hard for us to avoid. So I would say most people in a relationship with you who felt that you were really hurt and upset by the porn and they really loved you and didn't want to hurt you anymore would say, okay, I'm going to stop looking at that porn. And it's not a big deal to me. I'd like to look maybe once in a while, but if it's bothering you right now, I'm out. It's the person who says, oh yeah, I don't want that to bother you, I'm going to stop that. And then they go do it at work, or then they do it on another computer. Or then, in other words, for an addict, it's more about, yes, I want to please you and make you feel good by telling you what I think will make you happy. And then I'm going to go off and do what I want anyway. And a non-addict will commit to change, and they'll be able to stay committed and look you in the eye and say, I'm here and I followed my commitment. I think that's my best version.
Well, and I think that's a really good version. And I wanted to include on Seeking Integrity's website, under resources, there's a self-test, and you can go through and it's not a definitive, it's not by a therapist, but it's a good screening tool that will give you some
wait a minute,
ideas.
I wrote that self-test.
I know you did.
I wrote that self-test.
I know, but it's a self-test. It's not like a comprehensive, the therapist is administering it. It's just like, hey,
no, it's not like psychological evaluation.
Mm-hmm. That's all I was saying. It's a good self-test,
right?
A good gauge.
Well, okay. I was insulted.
Well, and there's no reason to be. You did a great job with that. So
I have a big ego, though. Okay, go ahead.
So the next question is, wait, I got to go to answered. Yeah. So what is the likelihood for partners to stay with the addict after disclosure? I'm still waiting for mine after almost a year, and my case will be really bad as my partner has been cheating on me during almost 20 years relationship with hookers, and also had some affairs with other women. It hurts me so much that he had this disease. I understand, but my question would be, how can he have intimacy disorder, but he planned a couple of romantic getaways with his affair partners and never even planned a date night with me? How is it that even possible that he has intimacy disorder, but he was intimate with the affair partner? His answer was that those events were simply hookups. I'm not sure how this is even possible. Lots in there. So I would start with the disclosure.
Oh, go ahead, Tammy. Why don't you start?
I was thinking, I'm sorry.
You answer that one. I'll take the other one.
I haven't, after a year of not having disclosure, and it doesn't even sound like a plan for disclosure, I would look for an expectation, your support therapist and his therapist. What is the plan and when is this going to happen? I think most partners, the idea of disclosure is that starts a foundation of healing. And so if the addict shows up, with the information, and this is, Dr. Roberts talked about this is a page and a half. This is not 20 pages of narrative of, and then on this romantic getaway with the affair partner, we went skiing. I don't know, I'm making this stuff. That's not what it is. So if the addict shows up with integrity and honesty, the likelihood that the partners and the addict stay together is actually high, because that starts the foundation of healing. So go ahead, next part.
I want to answer the other part of the question about intimacy, because I think that a lot of people really do not understand the word or what it means. And I really want to be clear, if you want to write this down, I've known this for 35 years when I finally began, and it's only still that I come to understand it every single day. And especially, I would say this is one of the keys for the men I work with, because they don't understand this word at all. So let me tell you first that intimacy has nothing to do with sex. There is sexual intimacy, that's a form of intimacy, but there are many, many forms of intimacy. Intimacy, yes. What does it mean to be intimate with someone? Does it involve your body? Maybe, but mostly not. Intimacy implies, if I want to be intimate with you, let me try it a different way. If I'm going to let myself be intimate with you, it means I'm going to let my guard down and tell you things about me. Intimacy is defined by your knowing me. The more I tell you, the more vulnerable I am. The more vulnerable I am, the more close you want to be toward me. So addicts, while they're so busy trying to not let you know this, not let you see that, and try to hide that, they're getting less and less away from intimacy. So I think your partner's right in the sense that, yeah, his hookups are not intimate. I'm not sure he's intimate with anybody, though, because if you're living with lies, he's never intimate with you. And, there really can't be intimacy if people don't know you. So I'll give you an example. This is so non-sexual and it was so intimate and I loved it. I don't know if you heard the story. So I went to the doctor about 2 months ago. I had some little elbow problem or something. And, nothing to do with sex, very nice doctor, but he heard what I did for a living, my PhD and all that. And he said, well, do you mind if I ask you a question? He's examining my elbow or whatever. And I said, sure, whatever. And he said, I'm 62 and my wife is in her early 40s. And sometimes I worry about, will I be able to please her? Will I be able to keep up with her? What are your thoughts about that? Now, first of all, I could have felt like, well, start paying me, buddy, because you're on my dime. But I didn't feel that way. I felt like he was a nice guy asking an honest question. And when he said those things about his fears about performance and his wanting to please his wife, he was intimate with me. We didn't have sex. We didn't have a relationship. I'll probably never see this doctor again. My elbow's doing well. But his saying to me, hey, this is who I am. And it's a little vulnerable to talk about. So I'm hoping that you don't get, because I could have said, well, you got to charge me for that. Or I could have said, I don't have time to answer that. I could have said whatever I'd said and shut his intimacy down. But I heard it and I felt moved toward him to want to be nice, to want to answer, to want to support him. And I got to tell you, if I were going to go see a doctor with those issues, I would go back to him in a heartbeat, because he made himself vulnerable with me in a really sweet and kind of, protective way. And I loved it because I felt like this man respected my experience and wanted to open up to me. So intimacy is when someone comes, what's intimate in a marriage? God, I was intimate last night. Can I tell you how intimate I was with my partner? Oh, Tammy, I don't want to say this, but I will. So, my husband's been very sick for about 6 weeks. He finally had his gallbladder taken out, And while I don't know about your spouses, but when my spouse is sick, he's not very nice. Lots of demands, lots of this, and so last night, I think he's feeling a lot better. In fact, Tammy, like 90%. But during the course of someone being ill, you're just you're fixing, you're helping, you're changing laundry, I don't expect during that time someone's going to say, thank you. But as he was getting better, it was like, give me this and get me that. And why aren't you doing this? And why aren't you doing that? Because he was still uncomfortable. And I sat down after work and I said, can we talk at the table for a minute? And I said, and I thought about, by the way, things I wanted to say, like, why are you doing this? And why are you doing that? But that's not intimate. That pushes people away. What I told him was what my truth was, which, since you've been getting better, I feel kind of invisible. I feel like I'm more doing things for you than I feel really connected or loved by you. And I'd really invite you to look at the way you're speaking to me, because sometimes you get angrier than you realize and it really pushes me away and I want to be closer to you. Okay, now I'm not saying everyone has the language for that. I did it for 25 years of therapy to get there, but I made myself vulnerable. I said, I feel kind of invisible. I don't feel, my spouse could have said, what do you mean? I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Would have shut me right down. There's the end of the intimacy. But guess what happened? He said, oh, I didn't tell me about that. I didn't realize I was pushing you away. And I said, well, since you've been sick, we had a great conversation about it. Even if we hadn't, ever since then, how are you doing? What's going on? How can I help you? He's working harder because I made myself intimate. He didn't shut me down. He took it in. Did we have sex? Well, that would have been a good evening to have sex because the emotional intimacy can lead to physical intimacy. But at my age, I'm actually just happy to have a warm blanket and somebody who will hear me and love me and, all of that stuff. So I have a lot of feelings about that word intimacy. And I really want to say it has to do with revealing yourself to someone you care about with the hope that they will accept you and accept everything you have to say. They don't have to like it, but that they will hear it with an open mind. And one more thing about all that, addicts lie, addicts cheat, sex addicts do. And we don't have perfect recovery. I know there's 60 or 40 spouses out there who want me to say, your husband or wife is going to go to treatment or go to therapy, go to 12-step meetings, and they're never going to do it again because that's what you want. The truth is we're all going to struggle. We're going to have slips with porn. We might see the ex-partner. We may, when we're out of town, see a sex worker. It's going to happen. Sometimes alcoholics take a couple of years to get sober. And it's true for us too, sometimes. But what's more important to all of you spouses, I believe me here, then I go look at some porn, is that I talk about it with my sponsor, I talk about it with my group, I talk about it with my therapist, and then I tell you. Because I've worked with so many partners who say, if you do that again, I'm leaving, and I completely understand that. But on one end, it's like, well, then you're telling me never to be honest with you and never to tell you because you're going to leave me if I do. And on the other hand, I've heard a lot of spouses, most in fact, who will say, I didn't like it that he or she did that, or I can't believe they did that again. But this is the first time they told me. This is the first time I'm not in the dark. And that breeds intimacy. As much as you're going to hate what I have to say, it may be the first time I'm really being honest with you. And that kind of intimacy is what grows relationship, even if you don't want to hear what I'm saying. Okay, I'll stop, Tammy. You have lots of questions.
We have, yes, we're not going to get to all of them today, but so here's the next one. Do sex addicts trust themselves? I put this one in answer. Do sex addicts trust themselves? Do they trust others? Speaking prior to treatment recovery. Can you please speak a bit on that? Thank you.
What do you think that means exactly, Tammy?
So I saw the question and I was like, I think I too much trusted myself before recovery, because no, seriously, I was, I can do this control, I shared with somebody earlier today, our best thinking got us into recovery. So, so we have this delusion that, we are in control. And if we just figure out the right way to put the puzzle pieces together, then it's all going to work and it's going to be fine. And, so I think we have an unwarranted trust in ourselves before recovery. I remember being fearful and not trusting myself. I was so worried. I was I was in treatment in a different state, and I was so afraid that the flight attendant was going to offer me a drink and I was going to take it even though I didn't want it. So there was a huge level of mistrust of my own self, which fortunately turned me towards other people who could become my trust. You mentioned blanket a minute ago. They became my trust blanket. So that for me felt like the journey. So your thoughts?
Great answer, Tammy. Well, I just want to add to the part where this person said, speaking of prior to treatment or prior to recovery. And I have to tell you, and I'll just put in our little plug, we run a treatment center called Seeking Integrity out here in California. In fact, I think the guys who are there are probably watching.
They are.
And one of the things that we go through, I think in the first week of treatment, is a lot of confronting. What are we confronting? Denial. What is denial? False beliefs that allowed me to keep doing what I was doing because I told myself that was okay. And so one of the first things that we have to do in treatment over the first couple of days, if not the whole time, is challenge that thinking. You thought this was okay. You thought this was a good idea, but what about your kids? What about your spouse? What about your job? Because when I'm an addict, I'm only focused on the fun. I'm not really looking at how it's going to affect everything. So no, I don't believe any addict who's not in recovery or treatment, I don't care what they say. If they tell me I've been through with 5 sex workers, I'm going to pretty much assume they've been with 10. If they've said they've never been there, I'm going to say, well, they probably only went once. Why would you believe someone who is fighting really hard to make sure they don't get in trouble? That doesn't make any sense. So no, I don't believe anything they have to say. And unless probably in the beginning, someone else says it, like I'm sitting in a therapist's office and that person, that we work it out in a professional way. So anyway, no, I would not trust myself or anything an early addict says, but especially myself.
So the next one, I gotta move it, is my addicted and I separate. Oh wait, and I separated husband. No, my addicted
Get this
and
right,
1 year
Tammy.
separated. It's a little confusing. Separated husband keeps mentioning God and everything he says in front of our adult children. He acts as though he were a good person. Is this a characteristic of sex addiction? We have limited contact, only the necessary, but how should I react to this? It's kind of embarrassing because all the family knows why we are separated.
Well, I think people do lots of things to try to look good. And that doesn't mean they don't have a belief or they're not, it's not something important to them. But I think if it's something that I thought people would approve of or feel good about as an addict, I'd say it a lot. I've been going to tons of meetings, 12 a week. Like I really feel, of course I went last week once, but left early. We're going to say the things that we know are going to manipulate or seduce or make you feel good about us. And if, regardless of what that person's doing in their real life, I would imagine they're bringing this up for their own purpose to leave a certain impression. Because what would be interesting is say, what do you mean by God? What are you doing with God? Going to church. You can really start asking questions and see what they come up with. If it's nothing like you've heard for the last year, they're probably just using it as a way to look good.
Yeah, and what they don't understand is that always falls hollow. Like you're like, oh, everybody knows. So it's like touting that whole thing. I've said this earlier to someone else today. What the actions are is what so lip service to God is hollow. So it's what are his actions, and I don't hear anything really changing in just what you shared. But as far as you being embarrassed, I want to remind you the shame is his, not yours. So the more you lean into, we've got drop-in groups for betrayed partners, et cetera. So the more you lean into support, the more I think you'll be able to internalize, it's, and shame is useless, but the problem is his, and being embarrassed for him acting like a fool, that's one thing, but you taking on that as part of you, it isn't. So
well, yeah, he's humiliating himself. He's pretending he's something. Addicts, we do lie to ourselves. And I will say to myself, oh, they're really going to look at me this way if I just act this way. And I believe it. So someone else might say, oh my God, they're humiliating themselves. We don't think that way. We think we're, playing the instrument the way we're supposed to, and that you're going to buy in. So what I love about this whole thing is this person doesn't believe any of it. Just even asking these questions is saying, I don't believe what he's saying when he comes in, and he doesn't seem sincere to me. And I'd go with that.
Next question. I'm the partner of a sex addict and would like to know how an addict can cheat and lie for many years and feel no guilt about the cheating, lying, spending money, turning off phone, and leaving me worrying, etc. He states no guilt or shame until after being caught. No shame spirals into being caught.
Okay, this is a kind of I'll try to make this as quick as I possibly can. Addiction is a disease, a disorder. And one of the things about addiction that defines it is being very self-focused. You could say narcissistic. So when I am, let's say, using heroin, that's all that matters to me. I mean, I like my family, I like my kids. I want to keep working so I can have some money to pay for the heroin. I might want some of that money we have in the bank and to pay for the heroin, but I'm not focused on my kids, my family, my job. They're just sort of out there somewhere. My focus is getting drugs. And I say this all the time, as a drug addict who's looking for heroin, I might spend my kids' college fund, all of it, getting drugs. But sober, with real work on myself and reconsidering how I've lived my life and rearranging my priorities, like family's important, friends, I might go back. I've seen heroin addicts go back and work 3 jobs to pay that money back because they're not inherently unethical or amoral people. It's just that the disease of addiction took over to the degree that they couldn't see anything but that. part of treatment, by the way, again, whether it's our place or elsewhere, is making people aware of what they really value and what's really important, because they're so laser focused on what they've been doing that's caused all these problems that once they let go of that, they're not sure how to feel good about themselves or get rewarded. One more thing, there is a neurobiological chemical piece of this. If you think about it this way, it's the easiest way I can say it. If we experience a traumatic event, we go into panic. And what does panic mean? It means our heart is pounding. For example, we have earthquakes here in California. If the earth started shaking, my heart would start pounding, my pupils would dilate, my hands would get cold, I would have a physical change in what was going on to me, because my body is finding a way for me to protect myself as best it can. And one of the things that happens when you're in crisis and you're releasing a lot of adrenaline is that you can only focus on that. I'm only focused on the earthquake or getting my kids safe, or I can't think about anything else. I'm just thinking about what's in front of me, because that's the nature of being a crisis. If I was still thinking about reading a book while I was dealing with a crisis, I'd probably die. So the problem is that the release of strong adrenaline is part of addiction. So when, and that's the intensity part. The reason I don't feel scared like in an earthquake is because there are other chemicals being released in my brain that make me feel good. So in a way, moving toward my addiction is like a fear, fun experience. The fear comes from the adrenaline. And when we have a strong release of adrenaline in our brain, basically we have tunnel vision. That's how we're built, is to only see the thing in front of us. And so when you're a desperate addict trying to get to what you want to, you're not thinking about your spouse, your friends. You're not able to think about any of those people. And then if you're a really good liar, you put it in a corner and you hide it and you never tell anybody until you get caught. And by the way, your spouse does not feel badly about their behavior. They feel badly about getting caught. And I'll just say this, if I've worked with 1,000 clients, 1,000 sex addicts over the years, 995 of them, maybe 996, came into treatment because they were in trouble. They were worried about losing their spouse, losing their marriage, losing their money, whatever it was. And I know this because I'll say to everyone who comes into treatment, oh, really welcome. Why are you here? And they say, well, I'm going to be a better dad. I really hurt my spouse. I don't want to be this kind of person. And I'll say, but then why didn't you come in 6 months ago or a year ago? You were still doing the same thing. Oh, well, my wife just found out. Oh, so that's why you're here. You're here because you got in trouble. I will say, and I'll give myself a little credit here, Tammy. I would say, well, I am one of, and I don't know about you, but I'm one of the few people I've ever met who said, I can't live this way anymore. I want things in my life more than I want the life that I'm living. And I'm willing to give everything up to do that. But I was 25, so it was a lot of years. And I'd screwed up my life so badly by 25. And I knew that I could do better. I knew that I could have better. So I had to make a different kind of commitment. And I completely changed my life as a result, and what I value and but I think intact, my love of people, my desire to give things away and support them, my deep, deep spiritual connection I have when someone writes me and says, you've helped me and I've never meet them or I'll never meet their kids. I mean, I have a tremendous, anyway, all those things were there before. It's just they were all masked by the insanity. One more thing though, there are people who are just sociopaths and they do act in certain ways and they don't feel badly about it at all. And that's the only treatment method I have. If someone comes to treatment and it's purely manipulation and they're really not that interested in getting help for themselves, I can't really help them. There has to be something inside that says, I want to be different. I don't want to live that way anymore, that drives treatment. So, Tammy.
So the next question is, I know this is very personal choice, but do you have any advice about reconnecting sexually in a relationship after disclosure? How long is fair for me, the betrayed partner, to say, I don't feel comfortable being sexual with my SA partner? And at what point and how can I bring myself to be comfortable with it again?
So there's 2 questions in there. When and how? Like when and how, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So Tammy knows a couple of hows. There's some colleagues of mine called Bill and Ginger Bercaw, Bercaw, and they wrote, I don't remember the name of the guide.
The sexual reintegration, but I'm going to caution you. They wrote this before codependency. There is codependent language in there. So if you can take what you need and leave the rest, there's really good content in there. Just, I would encourage you to take what you need and avoid the codependent language. They wrote that years before codependence came out. So that's my caution on that. Go ahead.
Well, I also think that, so there are paths technical paths, like, we can go to sex therapy. It's not I described earlier how addicts are often very reticent to be sexual with our partners. It's actually scary. It's easy for me and this is true, it's easy for me to go hire a sex worker tomorrow and have sex with them and have my mind blown than allow myself to be intimate and vulnerable with you, which will ultimately result in a much more meaningful experience. So part of this, by the way, depends on how long has this person stopped acting out. And if it's been 3 months, I wouldn't want to be sexual with that person. If it's in 6 months, I might not want to be sexual with that person. It could be up to a year, sometimes longer, before I really feel safe having sex with that person. And by the way, I say this every time. I'll say this to you. God, I must say the same stuff all the time, Tammy. Don't have sex with anyone you don't trust. Would you walk up to a stranger and say, I don't know you very well, but I'd like to have sex with you? Well, we would, but partners probably wouldn't. And it's kind of the same thing. If you don't trust and believe in your partner, either because it's been really soon or because you're not seeing the kind of actions that would produce trust and comfort for you, you're not sexual, and you don't need to be sexual, and you don't ever have to feel badly about it. This is your body, your safety. I think these are things that two of you can talk about. In part, you have to say, this is what makes me still feel uncomfortable. This is what we haven't worked through. This is why I don't want to get close to you. There are also degrees of closeness. Like I said, it may be okay to hold hands. It may be okay to do a massage or rub someone's back. It's not okay to take all our clothes off and have sex. So for some partners, and this is to all of us, right? Sex is not genital necessarily. Sex can be intimacy physically, can mean letting someone in, not necessarily into you, but they could be rubbing your chest. There are many, many ways for couples to be intimate. And I think that kind of behavior, without there being any, we've got to have sex or we're going to have sex or that's the end point of sex, is a lot easier. You learn how to hold hands again. You learn how to look into each other's eyes again. You learn to, trust comes in those moments before penetrative sex, So there's a whole kind of, what would you call it, Tammy, continuum or step ladder of all that.
Yeah. Well, and Dr. David talks often about sensate focused from Masters and Johnson, which is like you were talking about, is rubbing feet, rubbing back, whatever. So the spectrum, like we're going to start with what we are comfortable with, and it will be uncomfortable because it's like awkward dating. It's like the first, it's going to be a little uncomfortable, but owning that it's a little uncomfortable. That's what communication is, and intimacy. Yes, exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay. So can you switch to open again now on the
yes, ma'am.
questions?
I'm
okay.
Open.
So
I'm all
right.
open.
So I've been attending 12-step meetings for about 4 months now. The CSAT that my girlfriend and I see says that I should have a sponsor around 6-month mark, which instantly gave me anxiety because I don't feel I'm even close to reaching that point due to my struggle to connect with people. My question is, what would be an appropriate time frame to obtain a sponsor, and any tips on what to look for in a sponsor?
Well, two things about that. We're talking about fear of intimacy. And that's what I'm experiencing here. I think a relationship with a spouse, I know that a relationship with someone like a spouse, a role model, sponsor, who is a role model for me in recovery, is going to be very intimate. I'm going to tell them all kinds of things about me that I'm ashamed of, and I wish I hadn't done. And, I am trusting them to let me be intimate with them about everything. And they're going to support me and direct me. And this is, by the way, one of the gifts of 12-step programs is nobody can really judge anyone else. Somebody went driving down the highway and drove into a tree drunk while I passed out at a party and fell in the pool. It's all the same. You can't compare pain. You can't compare shame and embarrassment. We all share it. And I think you need a sponsor in the first week. I think, and you don't have to have a permanent sponsor. You can say, could we work together for a few weeks and see how it goes? Some sponsors are very easygoing and supportive and lead you to the next step. Some sponsors, like me, were very demanding and very focused. And if you don't do this, I'm not sure I can help you. There's a whole variety of people. But what's the most important thing in this question is you have to ask. Even whoever asks this question, what I already know about you is you're afraid of being rejected, or you're perfectionistic and you want to find just the right person. It doesn't matter. Ask someone who, listen to what they have to say. Oh, they're kind of living a life I want, and go ask them, would you work with me for a while? I'm looking for a sponsor. Maybe it'll feel right and you'll move forward, but you never know if you try. And you're like the guy who's sitting in the corner room while everyone's dancing and they're having a great time, and you're just sitting along the wall saying, gee, I don't want to ask anybody to dance. You're missing out on the fun, and in this case, on the healing.
And in most 12-step meetings, there's an opportunity. I mean, like, it can be part of the opening in the meeting is, are there people that are willing to sponsor? I know a lot of people, I've been in a few 12-step meetings where they'll say, I need a sponsor if anybody's willing. There's phone lists typically in meetings, and a lot of things are online, but there are opportunities within those meetings. And like Dr. Rob said, it isn't a permanent. Some people find their lifelong sponsor for the rest of their life. That was not me. And I often say for a season. So like this person can help you initially, and then you're going to grow some confidence. You're going to make a little more progress, and then you can find somebody else. That's all good. And it isn't that you're rejecting the other one. You can just go, thank you for all you've done with me. Now I need something else. All fine. But first thing I read this was like 6-month mark. I'd be like, yeah, heck no. And rather than having anxiety about it, just commit that, what's the worst? I always do this. What's the worst can happen? Somebody can say no. You will survive that. It's going to be okay, because you can ask somebody else.
One of my favorite answers. No, I just really appreciate what you're saying, Tammy. And it makes me think of, how often do you go to a 12-step meeting and raise your hand? Do you go to 12-step meetings and just sit and listen to whatever it has to say and then go home? Or are you willing to take the risk of saying, hey, this is what went on with me today, or whatever it is? Because if you are able to do that, you can raise your hand and say, it's really hard for me, but I'm looking for a sponsor. I don't know how to approach people, but I'm a single man or I'm a married man. And if you can help me, and maybe people approach you. Maybe it's too hard to go up to one person, but you can put it out there online in groups. Tammy will tell you we run free groups multiple times a week for addicts and spouses on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. You may go there and say, hey, are any of you in 12-step, or I've been listening to you in a group, would anyone, tell me more about that? There are lots of places to go to learn about it with actually diving into it. Hey, Tammy, I wanted to do a little promotion, if you don't mind, because we don't often do this, but there's some things I'm really, really proud of. And I want you guys to know that when I talk about the work that I do or have done, I don't do it to brag. I have a lot of resources to feel good about myself. I do it to help you understand how much of an impact the work I'm doing is having in other people's lives, so that you can understand that what we're doing has authority, if you will. So we have a podcast. I have a podcast called Sex, Love, and Addiction. Sex, Love, and Addiction. We just crossed the 850,000 download mark. So nearly 1 million people have downloaded that podcast, and a lot of sex and love addicts and their partners get answers to, well, like Tammy said, what about a maternal enmeshment? Or how do we learn to be intimate again? Or I think my husband's gay, or, all of those questions. I've got people from all over the planet who are therapists on sex, love, and addiction discussing that, and it's free. I have a blog, we don't talk about this much, Tammy, called Sex and Love in the Digital Age. It is on Psychology Today. It is also free. I have 1.8 million people have downloaded my blog. There might be one in there for you, considering the issues we're talking about. I'm all over YouTube if you want to see me give a lecture or help you have information of that kind. And then there's all the groups we run. I mean, there's so many opportunities for you to reach out to me or learn about the work we do or find your way into support. And we do this free for many reasons. Number one, people did it for us when we needed help. Number two, this level of expertise is hard to find without paying for it. And even if you find it and pay for it, people may be in another state or another country. And third of all, sometimes people come to our treatment center. And if one of you two or you come to Seeking Integrity, that pays for us to give everything away for free. So I promote everything that's free, and I encourage you to take a look at what we have to do. By the way, Tammy, you should mention the podcast we have together, since that reflects what we're doing here.
Overcoming Betrayal and Addiction is on, and it's on Spotify. It's on all of it, but you can always find the podcast and everything else on sexandrelationshiphealing.com, including previously recorded webinars. So there is so much information that you absolutely cannot capture it all, because we just keep free. Yeah, like that commercial, free. Yeah. So and you undersold the Psychology Today. He's in the top couple percent of, or not even percent, he's in the top like 5 Psychology Today bloggers, and I think it was closer to 10 million you've had readers, but I didn't look at the stats. So no, it's a lot. It's a lot.
I don't know.
But I'm telling you, it's a lot.
There's one more thing that we want to mention. Oh, maybe. Oh, well, I'll just say, you want to work on this work, you want to figure out how to do it. We also have paid stuff. You can go on the site and take the first 6 stages of recovery called what is it? What do you use that called, Tammy? That 6 stages?
It's Sex and Porn Addiction 101 workbook. We have level 1,
Part
level
1.
2, level 3. Yeah. So we've got a couples workshop. We've got all kinds. That's on seeking integrity. There's support sessions. Dr. Rob does an expert consultation. And I want to go back to what you said about the treatment center. Yes, it's paid, but Dr. Rob shared an email earlier with me today about a person who was an alum from a year ago, and this person, I wept. It's like, it was so beautiful, the transformation, because this person took what was said seriously. Now I'm going to share, I had a message from a spouse of somebody who came a longer time ago, and this person hasn't done anything that was shared with them. I take that back. They'll go to meetings, but this person is in relapse, and they're going to lose everything because they refuse to change, and that is sad. So I loved that this one person took it to heart and really and changed. And then I hate that addiction steals from everyone when people don't take the baby steps to change. So the guy that is asking for a sponsor, our drop-in groups, there's peer support. You be brave, just ask. You can do this. You want the good stuff. So.
Oh, and by the way, asking here is a great start.
Yes. I can't give you specific sponsors, but we can point you in the right direction. So we have time for one more.
Let's take another question. Sure.
Yes. So Rob's rule for relationships. Does this apply when you are trying to get out of the doghouse?
I'm looking for that one. Hold on. Did you
it's
just
in the open? No, it's in the open.
Oh, it's out in the open. One second, because it disappeared now.
You want me to put it in answered?
No. I think in early recovery, when I'm involved with my partner who's so angry and so hurt. So the answer is no, to be honest with you. I was on the phone, Tammy knows this, I do consultations, and I only do them once, and I do them with one person. I never go back. And my job is to figure out what they need to do and how to get better and all this stuff. And I talk to both members of a couple, and really in about 2 hours, my goal is to help them understand what they do next. After 25 years, I listen, and I ask a lot of questions. And then I try to say, well, basically, on my experience, here's some things you should do. And I ask the spouse a lot of questions. And then I turn to often the husband, but not always, sometimes the wife. And I say, well, how are you feeling about all this? Or what are you, as you're hearing this, because I usually talk to the spouse for a while, and the person who's been doing the acting out has to listen. And the first thing that almost every person who's been listening says, well, you don't understand why I did this. My wife did this, and my wife did that, and my husband did this. And I just tell them to stop. Like, I actually put up the hand, and if they don't stop, I get louder and I say, stop, because every addict thinks they have every reason in the world for doing what they do. And most of it is their partner's fault, or at least they want to hear what part of it. It is not our job in the beginning to look for our partner's part. Your partner may be 300 pounds and not have any sex with you and be mean to you every day and wishes they had children with someone else. And you can leave that person. You can divorce that person. You can start playing golf. You can start volunteering your time. You can spend more time with your kids. There are a lot of things that someone can do. Go into counseling. There's a lot of things that someone can do. And when they're unhappy with their partner or in a marriage, then go have sex with other people or have affairs or look at porn. That's our decision. So that decision to leave the relationship and go over here, to disappear from a relationship to make ourselves feel better, our partners don't have any responsibility in that. And I want every partner who's here to just understand, this is why I wrote Codependence, that none of you have any responsibility for what we did. But none of you will ever have any responsibility. You may blame us, you may shame us, may be angry at us, you may not want to have sex with us, but my decision to take that unhappiness and go and have sex with other people, I could have had a lot of choices, but that's what I chose to do. So once I make that decision, no, there's no more place for quite a while for me to say, well, you did this to me and you did that to me, because we've lost that right. Part of what Out of the Doghouse, this book I wrote, says is that you're no longer equal in the relationship. You're one down if you're the person who's been lying and cheating and screwing up your home life. And you should be, and my word for that is humility. I would be humble that this person is willing to sit here with me and even have a conversation. And if you don't understand the depth of the harm that you cause in relationship, well, I'm saying you probably don't, or you would know better than to ask this question, because no matter what your spouse did, it will never justify what you did. And no spouses, you can hate yourselves as much as you want, but you can't hate yourselves for making us do things that we have chosen to do. And with that, I will say, Tammy, it is always so much fun to do this with you.
Hang on one second,
ahead.
because a couple of people have said, can you say that again? And we're not going to repeat all those things. However, what we are going to do is remind people that this video will be posted on sexandrelationshiphealing.com under resources and previously recorded webinars tomorrow. So go to sexandrelationshiphealing.com and resources, and it will be posted tomorrow, and you can watch it again, or you can share it with a loved one who really needed to hear this message.
And I wrote a book called Pro-Dependence. And pro-dependence simply says about partners and spouses, how lucky we are to have you, how fortunate we are that anyone would hang out and support us, even though we're distant and unavailable. And then the fact that you would stay with us after all you've learned, you are a hero. Anyone who says you need to look at yourself for staying with this person, or why did you choose this person, is going down a road that I think is extremely detrimental to your partners. Why do you stay with us? Because you're so sick? No, you stay with us because you love us and you hope things will work out. So I really don't like the idea of partners having to take their own inventory, if you will, of themselves when you are not the problem. Now, one more thing. Some of you partners will say, during this journey with the addict, I became someone I didn't want to become. I've gained weight, I'm angry all the time, I'm nagging, I'm complaining. At some point, you might want to say, gee, I didn't like the person I became in relationship to how you acted, and I will take that on, but it would be a long way down the road before those words would come out of my mouth as a partner. I would have to hear a lot of honesty, a lot of integrity, and see a lot of good behavior. And if you read Out of the Doghouse, there's nothing in Out of the Doghouse that says you really need to tell your spouse what they did wrong that justifies what you did. That's not what it's about. Now, may I say, Tammy, it's always fun to do with you. You know, the good thing is that we can talk about really difficult things that are really hard to hear in a way that I think people can take in. And that, I think, is our gift. So thank you for that, Tammy.
And I agree. It's a pleasure to work with you always. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you for the great questions. I am so sorry we didn't get to all of them. Come back. We'll answer more.
Or
Dr. Rob is on.
Yes,
you can email me, Tammy, Tami, at seekingintegrity.com. And Dr. Rob is on intherooms.com on Friday nights. And Super Saturday Recovery Summit is coming March 20th. So join me then. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.